don't know who said this, but when I heard this, I was like, oh, I think I understand what empathy, especially as a parent, but also truly in any relationship means. They said, it's not your child's job to help you understand them.
Yes.
It's
Your
your
job.
job to figure out who they are.
You got it. Now, I think, though, that is really hard to put into practice. And so I actually spent, this is going to sound ridiculous, but
No, it doesn't. But
I spent like 5 years
yeah.
intensively studying the first ingredient of our problem solving
Well, thank
process.
God, because we all need to know how to do this. Because I don't think any of us really, I think we do it performatively,
Yes.
where we want to try to understand, but we don't know how to step into someone else's
Yes.
shoes
You got it.
and really attempt to understand what it's like being them.
You got it. And so I spent these years, we have all these recordings of people doing this from different places and people we work with. And I basically poured over them my own work and basically said, when this first ingredient, empathy, goes well, what are people doing? And when it goes off the rails, what are people doing? And I'm pleased to say, like, the result, it's not rocket science. When we do a good job of empathizing with another human, we're doing 4 things and 4 things only.
Okay.
And anytime we do anything other than those 4, it tends to go off the rails. So here are the 4. I promise they're not rocket science, okay? 2 of them are information gathering tools. Asking questions, clarifying questions, like any good detective would do,
Yeah.
trying to understand what's going on, okay? Because that's your job. You're a detective, trying to understand the other person's point of view. Ask questions, number 1, okay? If they're having a hard time filling you in, take some guesses. Educated guesses. Do it tentatively, because you're not the expert on them and their experience, but educated guesses. Questions and guesses. Those are the information gathering tools. The other tools are what I call the regulating tools. They are what calm someone down if they're getting upset, shutting down. And those 2 tools are reflective listening and reassurance. Reflective listening simply looks like when I ask you questions or take a guess, anything you communicate back to me, I let you know that I heard you. Okay. And I try to tell people, especially with adolescents, but with anybody, avoid the sort of rote, just like saying exactly back to you exactly what you said, because that's cheesy. It upsets people. And it doesn't show that you really heard them. Instead, in your own words, reflective listening is saying something like, okay, so let me see if I got this straight. What I hear you saying is, and then in my own words.
Yep.
And other people call this active listening, et cetera.
Yep.
Crucial.
Okay.
4th one, okay, because we got questions and guesses.
Yep.
We've got reflective listening. Last one, reassurance. And reassurance, what I mean by that is reassure the person that this is not some tricky form of plan A where you're about to try to impose your will. Because too often what we do is we say, let me try to listen to you, and now let me tell you what needs to happen.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
And by the way, kids are onto this like unbelievably. And we do it so much that I have to say one of the biggest impediments to getting this off the ground is kids are skeptical. Like when we start this, they're like, oh, yeah, what new form of plan A did you learn?
Yeah. Now you had your session with Dr. Avalon,
Exactly.
and now you're going to come check the boxes and then drag me back to therapy. I get
I had kids say like, what did you do to my mom? She doesn't even sound like herself anymore. But so reassurance, to be more specific, the way to do it is to say something like, I just want to understand. Or one of my favorites is, I know there must be an important reason that. Fill in the blank with the behavior not so wild about. Because I always remind myself, I may not love somebody's behavior. I'm sure there's good concerns behind it. And that's what you're trying to uncover with empathizing. So you're asking questions. If need be, you take a guess. If you hear anything from them, you reflect it back to make sure you got it. And if you need to, reassure them. So it looks like, hey, I wanted to talk to you about how you've been feeling. And I know I've been on you to get some help, but obviously there's good reasons why you haven't. And maybe I haven't done a great job listening. Can you fill me in? Like, what's going on? Why do you think that's the case for you? And I'm sure you got a good reason. And then
that is so disarming.
Right?
Like even as I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody.
Yeah.
Because what you've probably experienced is the tension and the pressure and the judgment and the standoff, and the only way that you can feel some semblance of control over your life is to resist what somebody's trying to make you do.
You got it. You got it. And I promise you, you can't go wrong. If you stick to those four things, I'm not saying it's magic, but it won't go badly. And it's almost impossible for somebody to get really worked up or shut down when all you're doing is trying to understand patiently. And if they're looking frustrated at all, you're reassuring them. And, sometimes you have to press pause and come back to it later. Sure. But you won't go wrong with those four things.
Just to recap, to make sure I'm tracking.
Yep.
The first thing is for you to really sit down and take a look at what is the specific dynamic and when does it happen.
You got it.
That is bothering you.
Yep.
And then you have to make a conscious decision about whether you're going to go with plan A, which is imposing what you want, which we know doesn't work. Plan B, which is the kind of collaborative approach based in the research and the neuroscience and all of the work that you do, which is about you activating this helping relationship.
Yep.
Or there's plan C, which is just use the let them theory and make a decision and say, let them. And I'm going to say, let me come back to this when I'm ready to follow Dr. Ablon's approach. And now we're at the part where you have sat down and you have really led with empathy.
Yep.
And we have asked the open-ended questions. I forgot the second part because I'm missing skill number 2, where you have the ability to have a working memory. So I'm going to be in there as I'm listening, going, "What was part 3?" So what's the next step?
So I'm going to do this with my hands here, okay? Because basically, what you've done in that first ingredient, the empathy ingredient, is you've gotten their concern or perspective on the table.
Got it.
Only once you feel like you've got that on the table, and they're reasonably calm. And why are they calm? Because empathy is regulating. Then you move to the second ingredient, which is where you are going to share your perspective, your point of view, your concern.
Now, let me ask a question about this, though, because you've just reassured them you're not doing anything. So should you do it in that conversation, or how do you set this up so it doesn't feel like a bait and switch?
Well, no. But notice what I said. You're not sharing your solution to the problem. If you were, that would be what I call tricky plan A. You're sharing what you're worried about, why you're having this conversation in the first place, not your solution. And this is the heart of collaborative problem solving.
You know what I just had a huge breakthrough. This is one of the skills that I need, because I think whenever I get worried or frustrated, I default immediately to problem solving mode.
Yes.
And that creates a tremendous number of problems in my life because I'm either running people over or I'm frustrated because I see a solution that I think works, but now somebody feels like they're being minimized or micromanaged.
Yep. I mean, look, the reality is people want advice far less often than we think. And even when people seem open to advice, they're typically not going to follow the advice if they haven't been co-authors of the solution where their concern and perspective is accurately represented.
Yeah.
So after you understand what's going on with them, you just share your perspective, your point of view, what you're worried about, not your solution. So if you had a solution in mind, you said, I think they need to do this, right? Like if you said they have to go see a psychiatrist and get medicine.
Right.
I would say, slow down, Mel. So you're saying they have to get medicine. Why do you think they need medicine? Well, they're horribly depressed. They can't get out of bed. Okay, so your concern is how depressed they are and that they're not able to get out of bed. Fill me in more about what you're worried about. I feel like I'm losing them. I feel like I'm, sort of they're slipping away from. Okay, good. I've got your concerns on the table. Yeah. So instead of saying, okay, I heard you, you need to go get medicine, you're saying, okay, I heard where you're coming from. And I like to teach people, say the word and, not but. Because but is, I heard you, but here's the real deal. Yeah. And is, I heard you, and I'm worried that it's hard for you to get out of bed, and I feel like I'm losing you, and I just see how much you're struggling. Now we have 2 sets of concerns on the table. Then and only then do we move to the last ingredient, the one everybody's really eager to get to, which is where you're inviting the person to problem solve together, to brainstorm solutions. But you have to tee it up like this. The reason I keep using my hands like this, if you only have one set of concerns on the table and it's Mel's, which plan are you using here?
Well, and also mine. And also when you got the one hand up, it looks like you're about to get smacked. So no, I'm serious. Like the visual's really good because if you think about it, like the whole 3-step approach is about getting their worries and
Yep.
their experience on the table and your worries, but
Yep.
zero solution right now.
And then you're
Just like,
working.
let's talk about what we're both concerned about.
You got it. And then you're working together. And I tell parents all the time, if you want a little tricky reminder here, a little trick to help you remember things, if you only have one set of concerns on the table and it's the adults, you're headed for plan A. If you only have one set and it's the child's, what plan you headed for? Plan C. How do you know you're doing plan B? You must have both sets of concerns on the table.
Oh, adult,
Child,
both. That's why. So it's adult, both, child. I got it. That's why there's 3 plans. You're a genius.
And here's the other thing.
I think I can remember that.
Okay, good. Well, it's only 3. Here's the other thing that's really important here is this order is intentional. Notice we don't start with the adult concern, then try to clarify what's going on for the child, and then invite them because they will shut down. And there's a reason for that, because our brains work in a certain way. Okay, information doesn't hit the smart part of our brain first, which is why you can't just start problem solving. You've got to regulate a child before they're going to be able to relate to you, before you can reason with them. And that rubric is a rubric coined by a good friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Bruce Perry, who does a lot of work with very traumatized kids. Regulate, relate, reason. And the reason I'm doing this is how you move up the brain. Regulation, low down in the brain, move up the brain so somebody can relate to you, and then finally get to the cortex and reason with them. And the 3 ingredients I'm sharing with you, those operationalize that. It turns into an action. First ingredient, empathy. Let me regulate you. Second ingredient, let me ask you to relate to me by sharing my perspective.
Which makes you a helper, not a solver.
Third ingredient, let's problem solve. And if at any point in that process they get upset with you or shut down, just go right back to the bottom of the brain, the first ingredient. Let me re-regulate you. Let me remind you, here's what I heard from you. Okay, got it. Regulate, relate, reason. First ingredient, second ingredient, third ingredient. Okay?
Incredible.
And,
Absolutely incredible.
And it's not easy, let me be clear.
Well, because you got to keep yourself regulated, which is a skill.
It is, although you know what the interesting thing is? Dysregulation is contagious, right? Like the person you're working with getting dysregulated or trying to help dysregulates us. I mean, there's nothing like being disrespected or things like that dysregulates us. But if you can just start with that first ingredient, empathy, you regulate the person in front of you, you're going to see what we call co-regulation happen. You're going to start to regulate as well. We humans, we can dysregulate each other. We can also regulate each other.
And I think that's a critical thing here is it's one thing to understand somebody. It's a completely different way to go through life and want to actually understand what somebody's going through and where they're coming from.
Yes.
It sounds like what we're going to learn from you today is an entirely different way to look at and approach a situation where someone's pissing you off.
You got it. What we've learned over the years is there's only really one reliable predictor of helping somebody to change their behavior.
What is it?